Hey guys, welcome back to another episode. An episode where I'm just going to really be continuing my top 100 NBA players ranking. We're going from players 90 to 81 today, which will mark the first 20% of the guys I've ranked. And one thing I want you guys to keep in mind, yes, 100 players is a lot, but to me, it's necessary to give props to this amount of guys, especially with how talented our league is today. I mean, to have guys like Josh Giddey, RJ Barrett, and Kobe White, guys who can just light up the offense occasionally and are possible future all-stars in our league, to have those guys down in my bottom 10, that does really say something about how rapidly growing the NBA is with talent. And with that in mind, all the way down at number 90, I have another star role player, a guy who has just moved from a top-tier contender in Jerome. Someone that saw a massive improvement in just the last year, going from a highly dispensable asset who couldn't even crack a consistent rotation for any team to now being one of the premier efficiency guys in our league. Ty is your peak bench offensive creator based on what we saw last season. In terms of just peak efficiency from anyone that you could expect in his role. He shot a blistering 52, 44, 87 split mark on real credible volume and was an undisputed top 3 bench player throughout the regular season last year. Ty, for me, he just brings natural pick and roll dicing to his game. He's got pure timing and feel for keeping defenders on his backside and being able to work in that quick 2-on-1 advantage as a fluid passer, a guy who does pose an extremely dangerous floater. He shot 58% in the paint, non-restricted area, and he's got extremely polished touch, which creates the bulk of that scoring threat that he does have. And as a point guard, you can't get much better than Jerome off the bench. I mean, he's such an instinctually strong weapon, a guy that floated a lot of those Cleveland minutes last year when Garland was off the floor, but also a guy that could blend in with your stars. He accentuated a lot of Darius Garland's playmaking with the off-ball fit, a guy that was able to be able to play as a primary shooting weapon in multi-man actions, and he was one of the league's best and most scorching spot-up shooters, and he claimed 1.36 points per possession. That ranked him in the 97th percentile, shooting 70% effective field goal percentage in those actions. Despite the playoff drop that we saw from Ty, though, I don't think people can really forget just how good he was as an offensive machine coming off the bench. He ranked in the 98th percentile of isolation actions. He ranked in the 87th percentile of pick and roll ball handlers. And his absurd touch made everything that he got quality. He didn't need much room to get his shots off going, and he hunted angles at an extremely high level. Defensively and athletically is kind of where he loses his spot. Ty isn't really a guy who can generate isolation rim pressure at an elite volume with the lack of athleticism that he does have. And stepping further into a greater volume of offensive responsibility would probably see a dip in efficiency for him. He can't really weaponize any advantageous speed. He doesn't really have any length asset, and he's not the strongest creator that we've seen as a scorer to the likes of his former teammates with guys like Mitchell and Darius Garland, what they could do with their speed and strength as rim pressurers, or guys that could just get down here with absolute ease. Though Ty had an amazing season for the Cavs, he was truly pivotal in their regular season success. A lot of that individual greatness to me, though, was largely due to the favorable surrounding foundation that he had. He was surrounded with big vertical spaces, versatile screeners, guys who saw the floor with him were guys like Evan Mobley, Jarrett Allen, and Georges Niang. And I think that does contribute to the value of his possessions as a ball handler when you have that type of gravity and versatility in your actions, and made the game a lot easier for him as a table setter. Overall, though, what he's going to bring to Memphis, he's just a smart and savvy scorer, a guy who doesn't need much room to get his jumper off. He does struggle against real athletes in isolation. He lacks major tools, as we spoke about, to be an effective late clock creator, which we did see against Indiana. He did melt down in that series to unplayable status, as the Pacers really just took away his comfort in pick and roll by shrinking the floor with high motor off-ball defenders and throwing physical screen navigation at him. And we saw when even guys like Tyrese Halliburton could have major success harassing him with his length, and Ty just seemingly couldn't overcome that within the series, and that is a massive knock on his value in the league. For me, the inability to help your team on the playoff stage, in Ty's case, against adversity, was the major part in Ty's dip in value in this ranking. even though we did see an amazing, great regular season from Ty. Though that can't be diminished. He's one of the most efficient offensive players in the league, full stop, and that's why he enters the top 100 list here. Moving on to number 89, I've got a guy who just came off an exceptional finals run, a guy who contributed as a versatile offensive piece in screen actions, a guy that brings skill, mobility, and athleticism, and also a guy that can provide above-the-rim scoring and a viable popping threat coming out of pick and roll, and that is Obi Toppin from the Indiana Pacers. And a guy that didn't really post huge production numbers for his finals run, but however, despite that, Obi Toppin was absolutely tremendous in the final series, considering the role that he has coming off the bench. He gave them huge games in games 1, 4, and 6 of the series, and gave Indiana 11 points and 5 rebounds in the finals in a 7-game series on 45-36 splits, in an extremely fierce defensive battle where offensive firepower was extremely hard to come by at a consistent level. And that was a major part in what helped them win multiple games in that series and pushing OKC to 7 and nearly having OKC on the brink of being down 3-1 in that game for scorching first 3 quarters that Obi Toppin had. In the finals, Obi brought skilled physicality, which is such a luxury for teams to have. He just has an ability to intimidate guys like Chet Holmgren in that series, just battling under the rim, giving them a powerful frame to add to the Pacers' size advantage and strength advantage that they did have in that series, which was extremely pivotal for them as well. But besides the finals, Obi was also allowed Indiana to uphold that high-pace offensive execution that they like to play with all the mobility and athletic movement traits that he does bring, and all the skill that he has as a polished jump shooter for his position, with the quick trigger 3 that he has as a positive spot-up shooter. And with the ball handling that he could bring to the squad as well, he was a frequent DHO initiator with Tyrese Halliburton, with also the finishing with his explosive agility against bigs, and also the mismatch attacking that he brought against cross matches in transition as well, bringing a bit of that Pascal Siakam flair off the bench. Obi just accentuated the strengths of what the Pacers did last season, and with the play finishing contributions throughout last year, he's someone that you could see be slotted into any sort of NBA system, and a guy that contributes amazingly with his skill set and his frame as a blend. And though he currently can't give you high volume levels of creation, and overall he is pretty limited with his skill set from bursting, next season onto the scene as a higher level isolation pick and roll weapon, Obi deserves a spot here for the modern NBA, how he contributes with that aggregate impact to a winning franchise with his spot-up shooting traits. Number 88, I've got a guy from Chicago. He's a guy considered as your star-level offensive guy. Someone that gives you skill, size, and value mostly as a screener, but is seemingly stuck on a mediocre squad in Chicago. I've got Nikola Vucevic here at number 88. The thing for me with Nikola Vucevic is more that he doesn't give you defensive tools to build a competent championship contender. That's why I have him so low despite being such a credible offensive threat. He's not a guy that can help you consistently erase mistakes from your point of attack defense. He doesn't offer much vertical rim protection, and overall he can't really attend to switching schemes for NBA defenses, and that does make him a vulnerable target in today's NBA. Besides the defensive limitations with Nikola Vucevic, though, it is extremely hard to overlook the stuff that he does for you as an offensive piece at your center spot. He is a guy that combines developed touch and an extremely big physical frame to give you 19 points, 10 rebounds, and 4 assists, which was his stat line last season on 53, 40, 80 splits. An extremely productive season as basic stats go for Nikola Vucevic last season, as we've seen since his Orlando days, and he's been a guy who gives you that all-star level offensive impact year by year. And last year was, again, no exception for a guy who is in his early 30s. Vucevic predominantly gives the unique value being legitimately one of the best shooting bigs in basketball. He gives you that stable creating force out of the post as well, with the strength and the positive shot touch that he has on tough looks. Out of the post, he made over 55% of his hooks. And with Vucevic, the Bulls have established a fun, speedy offense with a center who does contribute greatly with gravity off the ball, who does provide that spacing. A guy who actively is looking to move the ball continuously and give airspace to his creators as an occasional cutter and as an occasional relocating shooter who can hit extreme heat with his jumper. He doesn't need to be a super mobile athlete to be able to provide, contributions to a speedy offense. His spacing and his ball movement traits add to that enough. In saying that though, the mobility traits and the limitations there do diminish facets like his face-up game from reaching like elite levels, and with the lack of mobility, he also can't hunt supreme positioning due to this. And though the mobility does strike a chord for some teams who like look to build around tons of speed, even at the big interior positions, his value traits as a pick and roll man who can pop, who can roll, and who does have quality touch on seemingly every spot on the court, that does give Nikola Vucevic the identity of a high-level offensive anchor in modern-day basketball, and he does rank here at number 88, as he does deserve his respect here for what he does on a perennial level as an offensive player. At number 87, I've got Immanuel Quickley from Toronto. Immanuel comes in here after having a relatively productive year with the Raptors. He dished out 17 points and 6 assists after just signing his max deal with Toronto last season, who is in anticipation of Immanuel Quickley growing into their future star guard. IQ is a guy who fills in the question marks of most scorching athletic guards and what they usually tend to present. He does defend well. He's got length. He's got high activity off ball, and he's a positive ball mover with quick and deliberate penetration reads, which contributes to higher pace levels of basketball, which is valuable in today's NBA. And with this, he has earned the trust of the Toronto organization to be a worthy future asset to keep around, and not someone who's just going to be an inefficient pull-up, step-back jump shooter, and that's how he's going to make the bulk of his offensive arsenal. He's a guy that does commit to the other traits of offense and has established himself as a guy who can contribute on the margins outside of purely pull-up jump shooting. And along with this, with his high motor, he does also bring a value as a guy who is a defense to transition type of athlete, a guy who brings that as a big positive in his game. His hands when both recovering on guards and when he's tagging rollers from the weak side, that's a huge part of his defensive playmaking arsenal. And the bouncy and energetic feel to his game allows him to run out and create those opportunities for his team. He is a smart player, and he identifies advantages relatively well with speed and decisiveness. And when the jumper is scorching, Immanuel is a guy that provides real bursts of high-paced offense to today's NBA. And the shot-making foundation is relatively decent. He made over 38% of his pull-up threes. And though the rim finishing wasn't great last season, the inconsistent time on the floor played a major part into that. And the years prior saw him converting at around 65+% at the rim, which is something to be encouraged by. And with all the tools that he has, with the length, the intelligent downhill pressure, the angles that he can attack with the slight explosiveness that he does have, he just has enough advantages here to improve with the finishing, which will contribute to a more efficient production overall next season. The inability to stay on the court, with also the still developing touch as a sometimes inconsistent volume jump shooter, that does hold him back. But he's definitely in the right situation to reach that true ceiling that he does have with all the confidence and investment that the Raptors have and will continue to make. They've already started continuing to back him up with defensive switchability, even drafting a guy like Colin Murray-Balls to add to that big physical but mobile front line. Guys that have massive loads of physicality, just rangy forwards, that does give Quickley the room to be that lead guard of the future in Toronto. And quite frankly, for Toronto fans, there is just so much more to be convinced about with Immanuel Quickley. He just contributes to winning at just a much greater level than most guys in his archetype of scorers with athletic pop. He's got the distribution tendencies relatively down pat for his age. He has a more sustainable shot palette overall, and he's a high level defensive impact weapon. And Toronto fans should be extremely encouraged by what he may be able to bring in the future with some more consistent time on the floor away from injuries. Moving on to number 86, I've got simply one of the best and most dominant defenders in the game at the wing position, and a guy who does have a growing off-ball game that does fluctuate from time to time in consistency, but is developing quite convincingly, and that is Herb Jones from New Orleans. Herb barely played last year. He had a shoulder injury that allowed him to play in only 20 games. Despite that, though, he continued to show that he can contribute with a real ball handling future as a connective athlete. But obviously where most of his value comes from is being that power punching, wing stopping coverage defender, a guy who just has absurd length, tenacity, and a guy whose recovery work and what he does as a defensive piece, being able to track and contain movement whilst offering that quick spring contest to cover shot quality at one of the highest levels, just adds to the absolute incredible impact that he brings and what he can do nightly as a role player to shut down offensive guys for an absolute living. And with Herb, though, there are still limitations with his offense. He does struggle consistently with the jumper, and he's very confined to taking purely corner spot-up looks, as there really is no pull-up jumper whatsoever in his game, and the contested shooting is pretty non-existent. He doesn't really garner enough attention as a threat just yet, but he's still finding his place offensively on the floor. And that doesn't really deter his value at all, to be honest. He can still create against, relatively poor defenders. He's got some good agile size to be able to attack those closeouts with deliberate intent. And he's able to also provide timely cuts as well against those inattentive guys in the league. And also, 2 years back, he also just shot a very encouraging 42% from three on nearly 4 attempts a game. So there is stuff to be convinced about. He's only been in the league for, I think, 4 to 5 seasons now. But he's growing into the peak role play impact that he's going to have. And there is so much to love about the overall value that he does contribute nightly. Just being that defensive machine that he is. He's got the ability to close and swallow up passing windows for offensive engines while also being able to beat them to spots with that absurd lateral movement. He's just one of the best role player talents going around, and he has a defensive superpower that makes him one of the best role players in the NBA. Next up, I have PJ Washington. Obviously, guy that plays for the Mavs, a team that has built this physically imposing front line with two-way guys who can wall off and intimidate most guys around the league. And PJ Washington is absolutely no exception to this archetype that the Mavs absolutely adore. PJ just brings interior size to the game on both ends, just a strong battling forward who provides value on the glass as a bullying closeout attacker, an occasional mismatch attacker, and also as a spot-up shooter who has developed his shot touch over the past year to give him positive offensive worth. I mean, he's shooting over 38% on threes last season and 40% on catch and shoot threes, which again is something to be encouraged by the Mavs, who desperately do need spacing amongst their surrounding cast. The versatility of his frame is the exciting thing for PJ. He just gave the Mavs an option to play small ball lineups with his physical build and his tenacious attitude, and was able to play the 5-man in certain lineups, and that gave the Mavs a transition boost and just simply more space for their creators to open up looks for those designated spot-up guys on the squad, which was highly valuable when Derek Lively was out prior to the Luka trade. But despite the Mavs loading up and leading into this big interior front line after the Luka trade and also drafting Cooper Flagg, re-signing Daniel Gafford, PJ should still for sure find his way, as he has made himself a reliable piece off the ball with his movement and the threat that he does pose with the strength piece, attacking weaker matchups with composure, understanding how to exert his power through his shoulders and protect the ball with his sheer size that he does have. The Mavs have and will continue to rely on the value that he does bring as a ball handler, and that only adds to the diverse impact that he does bring on this end. But really, his value comes from the frame and the athletic qualities that he has, which strip into the defensive abilities that he has. He's a guy that can switch with bigs convincingly. He's got the lower base strength to be able to make bigs uncomfortable down low, and he can athletically contend with guards enough with recovery contests when containing drives. And it always helps when you are a high-level rebounder for your squad to boost that defensive impact as well. So basically, the reason I'm high on PJ is purely due to the net positive value you are getting on multiple different margins. Someone who knows how to use his body to his advantage in almost every facet of the game as a role player. And a guy that makes efficient decisions for a team that also has contending hopes. And that is why PJ ranks above guys who can score 20 a game nightly. Because for playoff teams, you are looking for a guy who can step in and provide that harnessed intensity to the game. And that's what PJ Washington has done for Dallas ever since getting out of Charlotte. Number 84 is probably a surprise for some fans. I've got Lauri Markkanen, someone who has been in All-Star conversations for quite a few years now, but now after a relatively mediocre offensive season, I do have him ranked substantially worse than last season, and here he sits here at number 84. For me, the production and efficiency drop was enough for me to drop him this far, which did diminish him in my criteria where I based off grading and evaluating your overall season. Lauri just shot 42% from the field last year and 35% from three, which combined for only 52% effective field goal percentage, which was his lowest mark since his Chicago days. And originally, the efficiency was his original calling card as an offensive machine who could deliver play finishing at the highest level of efficiency for his size. And combining that drop in efficiency with the lackluster ball movement contributions as really a ball-stopping target, I think his once elite offensive value suddenly becomes a lot dimmer, especially when the shots aren't falling as they weren't really at a consistent level last season. And with this drop in value, for me, Lauri is significantly worse off as an asset in this league, especially with a large contract as well. I mean, he just signed for 5 years, $238 million last season, and that just gives him the financial respect of a perennial All-Star, which he did not show over the past year. Apart from this, though, Lauri is still a powerful movement shooting force, in theory. His ability to attack off the dribble, coming off handoff and off-screen actions, just adds to the versatility that he does bring as a play finisher, and an aspect that most movement shooters in the league can't even dream of bringing. He just has that power and combination blend, which is an extremely rare commodity around the league for someone who does bring real value to an offense as possibly a top 3 scoring option on a team that could compete for a championship in the future. And though the dip in efficiency, Lauri should get back to that form that he was in prior. He does have enough tools. He's got the over-the-top size, but also, again, with that driving power that he brings, Markkanen presents just a real downhill threat, and that just gives him considerably more airspace to work with as a catch-and-shoot jump shooter. And that really is the beauty with Lauri Markkanen. I mean, he's just an overpowered spot-up weapon, and he's truly a guy that does give you 20 points every night, and in theory is someone that can do that to a really high efficiency degree. And the variety of actions that you can throw him in is the real appeal for Lauri. He brings too much physicality and too much size to his perimeter-based role, and therefore he is still a luxurious athlete that the Jazz have. And maybe another year of boosting his worth, getting back to that all-star level that he was at, maybe that can see him be dealt to a winning situation, a team that does trust paying him that much money to deliver high-efficiency results in a contending situation, because he is an offensive juggernaut at his best, and for a contending franchise, he can be absolutely mightily useful. And though we did see major dips in efficiency really out of every single action that he could possibly have run last year, he still poses a major talent who can also hold up on the defensive end, being able to take on powerful forwards with mobility. And for that, Lauri Markkanen is still one of the most luxurious assets to have in the NBA. And moving on, we have CJ McCollum from New Orleans, a guy who is still an underrated pick-and-roll isolation creator, and someone who brings a more sustainable feel to his game than most pull-up scoring guards. He just has more of a veteran experience, presence as well. He has more downhill angle hunting and his shot creation finesse, which much greater as it does play into your overall consistency on the floor as an on-ball guard. CJ's lack of explosive pop, his lack of verticality, and his general size disadvantages, they do hold him back as an offensive engine, but that's not a realistic role anymore for CJ in this league. However, in saying that, CJ did prove that he could deliver stable results once again for New Orleans, giving them a credible scoring punch at their point guard helm. And similar to Lauri last season, and in general, CJ isn't really particularly elite out of any action anymore, but he does give you that stable baseline. He ranked at least in the 60th percentile for all isolation, pick and roll, and transition possessions, where he does hunt enough quality as a more intermediate scoring weapon who does satisfy running some volume offensive possessions for a team. Overall for me, the IQ and the veteran feel that he gives him a bit more stability than most guys in his mold. He looks to actively extend advantages much more, and his overall shot chart is a bit more sustainable. However, there are still massive weaknesses that have confined his value to relatively mediocre standards. The lack of true athletic dominance plays into this as well. The lack of that athleticism has made him an average rim pressure, someone who does settle for tougher mid-range looks or tough contested floaters or step-back threes. And the lack of vertical pop, the lack of effective explosiveness as well as the lack of, elite agility, exploding off those changes of pace and changes of direction, that does diminish his scoring arsenal and value quite strongly and does separate him from the real star on-ball creators that we have in the league. But the fact that he is a reaction-based shot creator gives me more belief in his night-to-night impact as an on-ball creator. And as we know, sustainability is key for all live dribble initiators in the NBA today. And the defensive stability as well that he brings relative to what most guys of his archetype contribute, that for me gives CJ more of a well-rounded role player value in the future and makes him most suited for future surrounding cast situations. A guy who does give you true second side shot creation at a very appealing rate. And he's just come off a season averaging 21, 4, and 4 for New Orleans. So for that, CJ McCollum comes here ranked at number 83. My number 82 pick is your reigning sixth man of the year, Payton Pritchard, the spark plug of one of the true championship contenders of last season. Pritchard was absolutely exceptional in his role last season as that consistent scorching floor spacer for Boston. As I said, winning the sixth man of the year award for a 61-win Celtics powerhouse that looked deemed to really win the championship coming into the postseason just last year. For Payton, it's more the offensive value that he gives you with his gravity and the skill set. He shot an incredibly valuable 62% effective field goal percentage last season with over 72% of his shots being threes. Pritchard is just immensely valuable as that highly portable weapon, someone who can space above the hash mark, making closeout defenders recover out to more space than typical off their help, and that just gives that valued room for his surrounding stars in Tatum and Jaylen Brown to be able to execute as those driving advantage creators, just giving them much more room to be able to work with. And that is immensely valuable when you're looking at team holistic impact to an offense. The defensive motor for Payton is highly regarded as well. He battles with his stronger lower center of gravity. That allows him to deny drives, and he uses that natural speed that he has with the shorter frame that he has to be able to deny as many angles and gaps as he possibly can. And though he won't ever really be a high-end defensive disruptor, being able to avoid mismatch hunting by providing real ball pressure with fierce intensity does heaps to upholding your aggregate value on an NBA court, especially in a winning scenario, which Payton has been in for years now. Pritchard, just to me, had an exceptional last season. I mean, when you claim six-man honors and also you help your team pitch themselves as an undeniably resilient offensive force, with your added range, with your advantage extending, and with your impeccable touch that was utilized in chase, pick and roll, relocation, off-screen manners, that does make you a highly coveted role player piece. The metrics for Payton over the past year are absolutely stunning. He was a 95th percentile pick and roll creator, scoring the ball at 1.11 points per possession in those actions, which translated to the postseason where he was the league's best and most efficient two-man scorer in basketball, claiming 1.42 points per possession on an absurd 72% effective field goal percentage, which is something that you just don't see from normal bench creators. And talking about the off-ball stuff, he also contributed as a 97th percentile off-screen guy. And when you also convert on spot-up possessions with a 64% effective field goal percentage, where he was grabbing 1.25 points per possession, whilst also giving positive on-ball reps as a ball handler and a smart, positive decision maker, you immediately pitch yourself as one of the most respected and valued bench pieces in the league, which was what Payton Pritchard did in his step up and improvement of production and efficiency just last year. And that's why he ranks at number 82 for doing that for one of the best teams in basketball. And to round out the first 20 off my list, at number 81, we have one of the most experienced veterans in the league now with his resume as a champion and a former All-Star, Fred VanVleet. Someone who has contributed to Houston absolutely immensely over the past year as that table setter and that physically secure ball handler who had a scorching playoff series in their 7-game bout with the Warriors, where he was a 93rd percentile pick and roll scorer and a 95th percentile isolation scorer. For me, Fred just helps stabilize a quality base for a team. He just brings a large sense of maturity to his decision-making and an ability to initiate sufficient enough offense. And though he lacks, the ability to be an advanced creator in this league, he doesn't have the elite volume scoring punch, and that kind of derives from his inconsistent jump shooting and the absence of pure athletic advantages, though. VanVleet still gives that two-way value that is highly regarded amongst the league, and he helped manage a backcourt that featured an erratic Jalen Green to try and manage a mediocre offense by talent level. And defensively, VanVleet last season, and for his entire career really, has been a guy, and especially for Houston, who could deploy him as a strong off-ball reader, someone who could help cover for some advantages with his strong positioning timing, a guy that also brings some bulk strength that can deny further rim pressure for athletes who have those downhill angles already. And with that lower center of gravity as well, similar to Payton Pritchard, he's able to do that. He's able to halt those advantages with the positioning that he brings to the game. And that was a huge asset for Houston to have. His recovery athleticism itself as a help and rotate athlete aren't really remarkable, but the cognitive strengths that he brings with the timing and the spatial awareness as an off-ball disruptor give him a role defensively that, despite the stature, he can still bring at a positive level. And to round out, the real reason why I have this guy above guys that do score 20 a game nightly and much more talented offensive players in the league is that he did contribute to the 4th best regular season team last season, and he pushed who was, in my opinion, the 2nd best team in the West heading into the playoffs in the Warriors to 7 games, and was Houston's best player in the second portion of that long-winded series. And when evaluating his value to a contending squad, Fred VanVleet just brings enough of an on-ball scoring threat to hold him at this spot as one of the most experienced veterans in the NBA. And with that last one with Fred VanVleet, that does cap the first 20 guys off our list. I hope you guys enjoyed that quick 10-player breakdown and rank, and I want you guys to let me know whose rank you guys like or disagree with the most. All debates are absolutely welcomed. Tap in on the Instagram front to give us your insight onto the NBA and what you guys believe we got right or wrong at Casual NBA Fanatic. And I'll be coming out with more content soon, including the continuation of this list. I thank you guys for listening, and I'll catch you guys in the next one.